All right. Welcome, everybody. I think we're live. We're here today with a very special group of panelists for the 2025 Gerety Awards Australian jury, and we'll be discussing trends and favourite campaigns from this year's entries. But before we get started, I'd just like to do an acknowledgement of country from Murrumbina in Melbourne, Naarm. I'd like to acknowledge the Boonwurrung, Boonwurrung, and Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nation. Sovereignty was never ceded. These always were and always will be Aboriginal lands. And also a quick content warning. Some of the ads that we might be discussing today might contain references to sexual assault, war, drug addiction, and other potentially distressing topics. So we understand if these are sensitive issues, feel free to take a break at any time or do what you need to take care of yourself. About the Gerety Awards, why we're all here, named for Francis Gerety, the copywriter who in 1948 coined the slogan, "A diamond is forever." The Gerety Awards brings together an all-women jury to select the best in advertising, redefining the standard to which advertising has traditionally been held. And that's very closely aligned with Mavens, whom I'm representing today. We're a movement to champion gender equality through communications. Rooted in authenticity, we don't just speak on issues, we ignite conversations that demand attention, inspire action. We've done this through magazines, events, community conversations, and soon a podcast for the communications industry. So we're all very aligned. And with that, I'd love to introduce our panelists here today. We've got our jury president, Stephanie DeGian Vincenzo, creative lead at Meta. We have Robin Bergman, creative director, Hui Yin Wong, senior art director, and Becky Morris, creative director at DDB Melbourne. So with that, we'll dive straight into some questions. I'm itching to hear what the jury thought of this year's awards. And the first question I've got is, what makes really amazing work in your eyes? And what are the sort of qualities you're looking for with the judging? And I might throw to you first, Steph.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I guess there's two things for me that define great work, and I think it showed up a hell of a lot in the work that we got to see as part of the jury this year, which was really great and really inspiring. The first thing is that I like it when an idea surprises me, and that might be because it's original. But I think more than originality this year, what I loved was just that there was so much work that was centered around a genuine human truth or a cultural truth that hit me that I maybe hadn't perceived before. So that's probably the first thing. The second thing is, I'm a creative at a tech company, so it's all about scale and impact. So results for me really played a big part, and understanding that, an idea can be a great idea at a small scale, but it's probably even more powerful at a large scale. So they were the kind of two things for me.
Robin,
Right.
would you like to?
I was going to jump in there as well.
Becky?
I guess, yeah, for me, what really makes great work is when it makes you feel something. So,
Mm.
whether that's laughing, crying, feeling, even at times feeling angry, but also inspired. And, a lot of the work that we looked at this year did that. And it really stops you in your tracks. That's another thing I look for is, is it interesting? Is it, surprising, like Steph said? Is it, how have they brought the idea to life? Is it a really interesting insight? Or is it, that they've used the media in a really interesting way? And I think a lot of the ideas we looked at this year did that. And I think, when looking at the work itself, the things I think about is, I guess, first and foremost, simplicity and clarity. Do I understand it? You don't want to be deep diving into, the backlog to figure out the idea. You want it to sort of sing to you straight away. And then also, as an art director base, always craft is something I look to. Does, the visual language empower the campaign, or does it, does the writing make it wonderful?
That's such a great point about simplicity. Like, I often find the best ones are the most single-minded, and they're the ones you can almost read the proposition off the brief and retro figure out what that would be.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, it's so hard to be simple, right? Especially when you're the creative on the job that spent months and months deep in the trenches of research. But you can definitely instinctively feel when an idea is is kept to its purest, when it still contains the core in which that it sprung from. Just kind of bouncing off both what Steph and Becky have said earlier, it's definitely the sharp insight that comes from just the human being alive in the world and the craftful execution. But the thing I was told quite a while back by someone is when you're judging shows, the feeling that you look for in yourself is a feeling of envy or jealousy. And
Mm.
I definitely got that for certain pieces, being like, damn, I wish I did that. I wish that was something I could, have helped being a part of in making. So I think just something to differ when you're on a jury panel and what you actually look for within yourself is that feeling.
From my side, I think that's such a beautiful insight, where I think what I was looking for is work that, exactly as you say, I didn't need to work too hard to understand what was going on. And I think that's such an art to actually package up your idea in a way that is going to translate to all sorts of different kinds of people who are on your jury. And I think, we can get quite caught up in our own idea and get sort of like tunnel vision, and to try and always remember that we need to communicate our idea, our brilliance in the most simple, most clear way to a jury. And that's the kind of work that was really showing up, and was really cutting through, was the work that everyone was just getting it straight away. It was just
That's a
beautifully
great point.
communicated.
Great
Yeah,
point.
actually something that, oh, sorry. Something that came up when we were all together also was the talk around categories and what each work was submitted into. I think that's really important because we were, like sometimes a work is amazing in concept and brilliantly executed, but it may not have done as well in the particular category that it was submitted for. So that's something just to be cognizant of, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point. And with audience as well, because these are global entries, weren't they? So all different audiences around the world. With that, I think we're itching to share our favorite pieces. So what was the most original piece of work that you saw this year, and what was it about that piece of work that stood out to you? I'll start with you, Robin.
Yes, there was a piece that I really loved, and I think it was original for a different reason. It wasn't because it was the most original idea, but it was original because it performed in a unique way. So this was it was a film called Everything or Nothing, and it was for the Crawford versus Madvinov boxing match. I mean, I can't even say the names. So it was for a boxing match with these two heavyweight fighters, and traditionally, boxing ads are sports ads. They're perhaps a bit aggressive. They're sort of filmed in a certain way. They have a certain look and feel. They're pretty much very maybe more sort of skewed towards a male audience. They have a very sporty kind of look and feel. But this ad behaved in a totally different way. So it was telling the story of these two boxers and how they had reached the heights that they've reached, and why they've got to where they've got. But it literally had a whole room of women leaning in, fascinated by the story of these two boxers. And it was entered into a category for, I think it was for direction craft. There might have been in the cinematography category as well, but it was very much so. It wasn't. We weren't judging it so much on the idea. We were judging it on how it was beautifully put together, and it definitely stood out. It was universally loved. It was really just so much care and so much attention put into how they told the story of simple ideas. Not even like it's a new idea. It's been done a million times, but it's been done badly. And for the first time ever, you had a group of women going, "Oh, I might actually watch that boxing match," or "I'm suddenly interested in boxing." Because I'm interested in these people and their human stories. And it really made everybody feel something. Beautifully cast and filmed, and the cinematography was lovely. Everything about it was just so crafted to the nth degree, and it really elevated the work. And it was original for me because it was the first time that I had ever actually considered watching a boxing match because of an ad. So that's a really original thing.
You're not a big boxing fan, Robin?
Yeah, I could become maybe.
Yeah, you're.
Yeah, that was such a standout piece, actually. And yeah, it was submitted into the cinematography category too. And we were discussing in the room, going back to Becky's point of like the right choice of visual language to communicate it. Like
Mm.
it used this documentary style, kind of very observational. Everything was a still frame with moving elements in it, which kind of really told you the backstories of these boxers, like what builds a great boxer, what inspires them and drives them in the ring. And we also discussed the kind of really smart flip on having the present day footage in black and white and the kind of, I guess, retrospective memories of these boxers in full color. Just kind of that little flip there just made it feel so much more powerful in that sense that they were building up to this like iconic historic moment in the present day.
It's definitely had a beautiful build, and it was quieter as an ad. Like often boxing is a lot of like movement and like um, sweat flying, blood flying, whatever it is.
Mm.
But this was just quieter and a lot more gentle. There's a lot more
Yeah.
That's an
sensitive.
interesting observation. Yeah, they're usually quite hyper masculine, aren't they?
Yeah.
This one has a lot more nuance. Yeah. Hui, I'd love to throw to you for your favorite piece, just so we can get through everybody's because there's so many good ones.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. My favorite piece from this year was How to Quit Opioids. Um, we saw this piece entered into the integrated category, and I just love an idea that can kind of show stretch, but still remain so simple. Like at its core, even the out of home of using the phone number and the numbers on the pills of the opioids as the extension was just such a simple thought to me. Um, that kind of they really showed like the stretch of that idea throughout different channels. Um, the one thing that I thought was like quite strategic about it was the choice to tailor I guess, the advice to each opioid. Because, if you're someone that's addicted to opioid A, you might not resonate so much with someone who's had, experience with a different type of opioid because the effects could be really different or whether that's perceived or experienced. The idea to relate the opioid you were addicted to someone who had gone through a very similar thing, I thought was a really beautiful kind of connection. And lastly, about the piece, I just love the kind of like, I guess you could call it like low tech. It feels very 90s in that sense, throwing a number and like listen
Yeah.
to voicemail and things like that.
Very human,
But
yes.
yeah, but it does kind of create this very personalized, intimate feeling. It's not like you're going into like a room full of strangers who might, feel like a little bit, I guess, like prodding you in different ways. But if it's just a phone number, you can find a place that you feel comfortable dialing this number. It doesn't look strange or feel suspicious, to, I guess, anyone with, from an
Mm.
outsider's point of view. Um, yeah, so I think overall that was my favorite campaign in that sense. The one thing that we discussed in the room about that campaign was the facts like such a simple idea, such like so true to its core. The weakest link in the integrated kind of suite of executions was actually the film. That felt, I think, it could have used a little bit more of a twist. It kind of felt like it had they just made a film because they thought they might have needed to fill a media plan or anything. I don't really know the context behind it, but I think that's also showing this kind of trend of like, do we really need to always build 30-second spots? Like the billboard is so powerful. Seeing that on bus benches or bus stops everywhere, could that have money have been spent elsewhere in the campaign?
Because I think that was in the integrated category, wasn't it? So they would have been trying to show stretch across different media. And it
Mm.
sounds like it worked better on some than others. But
Mm.
those billboards were stunning. Like, yeah, seeing that 1-800 number or whatever it was for the overseas, but and then the peel numbers forming the end of that number was super striking. Couldn't walk past that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, another thing we mentioned in the room was like because if I was an addict and I saw my drug of choice on a billboard, it would instantly capture your attention just because your brain's conditioned to look for these things. So just like brilliantly put together in its simplicity there too.
I think
What
to
was
add to that,
that?
Wade, just the strategy. Oh, sorry, Robin.
Go for it. I think you're about to say what I was about to say, but absolutely.
You say it. Go ahead.
You do it.
Steph, I'm nominating you.
Okay. Just like the way I think my favorite thing about this, and obviously this was a favorite of mine as well, but it was the smarts that they applied in terms of how they bought the media and where they deployed the creative to certain geographies. So they found the data, or they used a data set that informed like what was the highest drug addiction to that drug. So for example, if Oxy is really common, a common addiction in LA, then LA was going to get that billboard, which then speaks to what Wei was saying of like, if you have that addiction, you're going to see that pill on that billboard, that's going to immediately grab your attention and then increase the likelihood of you calling that number. So I just love that out of home is traditionally like quite a, I don't know, one-dimensional, slightly, I don't want to say dumb, but dumb format. It's not that data informed traditionally, but they made it data informed, which was so impressive, I thought.
So brilliant.
Was that along the lines of what you were going to say, Robin?
Yes, it was. I can add one tiny piece to that. I think the strength in that idea is that they've transformed what was a pill into help, into a phone number. So that person who is perhaps addicted to that medication and is looking at it every day or thinking about it every day is now thinking about it in the context of a phone number that is going to give them help. So that was so mind-blowing. Just on so many levels, it was just like, as Becky said earlier, it was surprising us.
Yeah, like totally, you're right. Like when it's in the palm of your hand, like just making that association. Love it. Love it.
It's the end of a phone number now.
Yeah. Help is in your hand.
Exactly.
Along the lines of works for good, Becky, I'd love to throw to you to talk about equal communication.
Yeah, sure thing. I think this campaign really stood out. It was a radio campaign, so it was called, as you said, Equal Communication by Terre de Femmes. I hope I'm saying that right. And look, it's interesting because it's things that we've heard about a lot, we've spoken about a lot. There've been campaigns sort of in this field, but I mean, this was in the category of copywriting, and I think what also made this really stand out was the media choice. So it's a series of radio spots, and what each of them do is address the subtle forms of gender-based equality that we face at work. And it was, all those great words of, mansplaining, manterruption, and my favorite one was bropreating. So each ad was about each of those different things. And it featured, the casting was great. It featured a woman who would start talking about these things only to be interrupted by the male cast member, who was exhibiting the very behavior that she was trying to describe. And it was just so simple. It was like, yeah, that is procreating, like in its simplest form. And, even the casting of the male talent was so appropriate for each of the different, procreating or mansplaining. And even on the day, I think in the room, like all of us, we're chatting, like we deal with this kind of behavior day in and day out. And I think it was one of those pieces of work that it made the hair stand up on my arms because I was a bit cross, but then it also made me laugh because I'm like, yeah, I deal with this all the time. Yes. Yeah. And I think it was so lovely because it mirrored real life and what we all have experienced. But then hopefully it prompts listeners, particularly male listeners, to go, oh, crap, I do that. And it may be unintentional, but I can start looking at my behavior and hopefully changing it for the better. That really stood out to me, that one.
You did a great job of explaining that, Becky.
You did.
That was actually, it's such a beautiful piece of radio. It's so simple, but yet every little detail was considered, even their casting of their voices. So they considered that like if I cast that type of male voice that's more appropriate to that kind of mansplaining or that kind of procreation behavior. So like it was just like really, really insightful and really considered every single thing. Very cleverly woven together.
Great piece of writing. It could have smashed out the copywriting category, but I think it was in casting, I think.
No, it was in copywriting as
It
well.
was
And
copywriting.
yeah, they could
Yeah.
have made it so cringe. But I think Polly in the room also pointed out so brilliantly that day that it was so pared back and restrained. It wasn't like, overly
Yeah.
loaded with sound effects or anything like that.
No.
So it felt a lot like a radio play that you were part of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real conversation. Yeah. Very.
That's a good one. Steph, yours was divisive. I really can't wait to hear your take on Nutterverse.
Yeah, and I get what's divisive, right? I think in these kinds of scenarios where we're judging awards, we have a very narrow idea of an idea. I think as an industry, we define an idea in a fairly narrow way. And I think sometimes that gets in our way because what Nutterverse did was they created something so culturally resonant with Gen Z that it became an absolute sensation amongst that generation. All the while, none of us know what's going on. Like the rest of us, generationally, us old people, are completely out of the loop. So, I mean, when I saw this, obviously, I spend my days thinking about how to make things, you know, catch on culturally and how to do really great vertical video and how to manifest brands in social context. So this is where my head is always at. So when I saw this, I was blown away because I thought, oh my God, they've nailed all of it. And it's in such a chaotic, unexpected fashion, but wow, have they done a great job. So I love that they leaned into the chaos of it. I love that they leaned into just this surrealist universe. I mean, that is the idea, right? It's just surrealism done circa 2024 or 2025.
Something.
TikTok, right? Was TikTok
It was
mostly?
yeah,
All TikTok.
yeah. And I mean, the fascinating thing about this is the entry said they got a cumulative attention, it was like 45 years of attention that they earned through that TikTok account just by being wacky. It's wild. And also like kudos to that CMO for signing off that idea and going, you know what, we're
Yeah.
gonna have a crack at this and we're gonna
Yeah,
see
so
what
brave.
super brave and it really paid off. I mean, their results were insane. And it's one of those things like it is a unicorn idea because against all of our, I think, instincts, it is an idea that caught onto culture, and that's really, really hard to do. So that's why I loved it.
How
And
would you describe?
it's almost created almost like a visual genre of its own. It's,
Yeah.
and I think we were trying to give it a name when we
Yeah.
were watching it. Do we call it like the meme genre, or it's just so rooted in memes and in this kind of visual language that's out there that doesn't make any sense at all and it's not crafted. It's almost anti-craft. I think they actually used AI to generate tons and tons and tons of material. So they scaled it up by automating it. But it kind of just its nuttiness it just suited it perfectly.
Hinged core. Yeah.
That was my next question. How would you describe the aesthetic? I think unhinged core is perfect. The common thread was the biscuit, wasn't it? They always had the little biscuits with faces, kind of like it was quite creepy.
Which I mean, brand association, tick.
Yeah.
Like immediately, you know what they're not about a biscuit. There was so many gems through that where you're just like, this is brilliant marketing, but it's disguised as something that, is kind of fun and like cool, So I mean, I would call it digital surrealism, which we haven't really seen that interpretation of
That's a good
before.
one.
Yeah. But the fun thing is like they own that now. No other brand can do that. That's just their look. If anyone else tries to do that, they're probably going to get called out on it as copying Nutter Butter. So Yeah,
Yeah, it
kudos
was
to
just
them.
interesting because there's so much conversation around like holding on to craft, holding on to the human craft, and don't let AI come in and automate and scale up things and scale up visual noise. But this is scaled up visual noise.
Yeah.
It's completely counter craft, which is just it sort of makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck a little bit.
Well, it was launched, I believe it was launched on Halloween or around Halloween, so that checks out that it was a little bit creepy.
Yeah, so lean into that for sure.
Okay, well, I'd love to just zoom in on trends because I know a lot of people are wondering, like, were there any common threads in the work? But also like social trends, like what did we notice about this year's entries in terms of maybe the state of the world or how we might connect the work with what's going on in culture?
I mean, for me, it was very reflective of what's going on in the world, to be honest. I mean, it's interesting because years gone by, there probably, for me, when I've judged other award shows, there hasn't been quite so much, I guess, sadness, like to back at us. Right? There's a lot of stuff happening, right? There are wars, there's political unrest, and I saw a lot of work either reflecting that indirectly or literally confronting it head on. Um, and it is kind of a sad state of affairs, but at the same time, I took a lot of hope out of it because what I realized was that our industry continues to be part of the solution in a lot of ways. Like raising awareness and turning a camera towards these issues is ultimately what leads to change and positive improvement. So that gave me hope. But yeah, it probably was one of the heaviest years looking at the work cumulatively for me.
The first speech by Reporters Without Borders was one of your favorites, Robin.
Yes,
Do you have any
yes.
thoughts on that?
Like, I suppose it's a piece that really hits really hard at this time. If we look at what's happening around the world, so many countries sort of struggling with terrible war and terrible government sort of overreach and human rights issues and all sorts of things. But this campaign it's just so beautifully put together, and it's almost there was a discussion around how subtle it actually is, and it was subtle for a very good reason because what it is it's a series of ads about the first speech um, of presidents that then later became dictators. So it's that moment when they were first inaugurated into their role as president or prime minister or whatever they are. And it's almost like a snapshot of a moment in time when that country were almost on the verge of hope, of feeling like this is actually a good thing. Could this be a good thing? This person is talking about all these promises that they're promising to the country, and they're describing a future that people can kind of like imagine. But then obviously, it's beautifully shot and beautifully crafted because it's almost like you see it goes from scene to scene of people listening to the speech, and it's almost like time is stopped and you're listening to the speech, and then it has an amazing rug pull at the end where it suddenly jumps forward and it goes, this is the first speech of this person, of Vladimir Putin. This is the first speech of the I think it's the Turkish president, it's the Venezuelan president. So, and then you realize that this is what this person became. This is the reality that these people are now living. So the hope that they had for a moment in time did not materialize into anything. And then it ends with this is a campaign for Reporters Without Borders. So it's talking about the importance of reporting and freedom of speech. And I can't think of the line now. If anyone's got the line in their heads, there's a really strong line at the end as well. I think we were all just yes. But I think a piece that was so beautifully crafted because it was subtle, because this kind of like I'm going to call it what it is. This kind of evil is subtle. It masquerades as something else, and then it becomes what it really is once it's gained hold of a country or a people. So yeah, really really powerful piece.
That takeaway about the need for independent journalism feels so universal. Like recently, I saw Antoinette Lattouf speak in Cannes last month, and she was talking about, her views on Palestine and the ABC kind of trying to censor that. And, it just reminds us this can happen anywhere, like we need independent journalism, we need free speech, and we need to embed that in our culture for our own safety.
Yeah. And it's so relevant for now. It's happening right here, right now. So it really hit hard.
I mean, to build off what Steph kind of pointed out with the trends of like really important issues being talked about, there was one piece that actually like stuck with me a little bit in the days since, and it was in the print category, and it was about the rise of neo-Nazism and the need to remember mistakes of the past. And it was just two words, like the Holocaust, printed all the way throughout the magazine, the Holocaust, the Holocaust, the Holocaust, the Holocaust. And at the end, it was a beautiful line about you have to remember so it doesn't repeat itself. This is just me paraphrasing really poorly, but it was something like that. And I just think like with all the events that are happening in the world, that's probably what's giving rise to this digital surrealism that Steph coined earlier, of just this need for like people to escape into something and to escape the like chaos and unhingedness of the world, which I think is like the counter trend that's coming from just the state of it.
That's such an important observation. I do feel similar. You open up your phone, you're looking at Al Jazeera, you're seeing these shocking things, and it gets to you. Like it really does. That appetite for something different, something so far away from that, is relatable.
I think it's also a reminder of the role that brands have to play in people's lives. They can bring lightness, they can bring fun, they can bring escapism, they can bring entertainment. And something like Nut Butter certainly brings escape and fun. It's not making you think too hard.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we need a bit of a tone shift because it's getting very depressing. I'd love to just quickly to cover off one more piece of work that was brilliant, and we didn't really cover it in our warm-up conversation earlier. But Becky, you loved the Squarespace piece, A Tale as Old as Websites. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. Well, and the actor's name has totally jumped out of my head. What's his name again? Who's the main lead?
Yeah.
The guy from Saltburn.
Saltburn guy.
The Saltburn guy.
Sorry.
But I think, what we commented about in the room is so often brands use, someone famous. And it's that borrowed interest of someone famous. But this spot was just so wonderful. It's set in a small town in Ireland, and this protagonist, and it's going to really drive me nuts what his name is. He's on this donkey, and I guess it's sort of borrowing from the tales of old that, you're throwing out old newspapers, but instead it's a whole bunch of laptops that have preloaded amazing websites, Squarespace websites on them. And he's throwing them out to all of these wonderful, craftsmen in this small town, craftsmen and women, to celebrate, what they do and bring their wares to the world. And, it's kind of, I guess, the underlying tone of it is that, websites are the new newspaper. It's the new way of getting your business out there. And it's just so wonderfully quirky and weird. And at the end, the donkey and him somehow fly off the edge of a cliff and into the abyss. But it's just, it's wonderfully shot. Just the characters and casting are gorgeous. There's this sort of, drawl, like Irish music through it the whole way. And it's just kind of creates this magical world that you become really invested in. There we go. Yeah. Barry Cohen.
Barry Keoghan.
Yeah. And it's just a lovely piece of film that, I know it launched at the Super Bowl, and it's a bit. There's a lot of money behind it, and I think you know, in a way that was also a point of discussion in the room is not only did we see, you know, pieces that had huge budgets behind them, there was another boxing ad that also felt like a huge epic movie trailer. And so, you know, you can kind of look at those pieces and go, you know what, you've really looked at this money, and I think the Squarespace spot in particular applied it in a beautiful way. You look at it and it's a piece of craft. And then it was kind of interesting too to sort of look at other pieces and other campaigns and brands that didn't have that money behind them, and how, you know, budget isn't always a limitation. You know, if you've got a great idea and you apply it, you can make wonderful work at all levels. Yeah. Do you guys have anything to add on Squarespace?
It
I
was
do wonder
one
how
of
many times they mentioned.
Oh.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yes, exactly.
Yes, we
Yes, we
do.
do.
I'll leave that for you to say. I found it interesting that they launched it at the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl is so known for celebrities. Like every single ad's just got another celebrity. But this was like almost doing an anti-celebrity thing. Like he was behaving in a way that was so quirky and so unexpected, not in the typical Super Bowl way. That was cool. But
Yeah, I was just gonna add, like, I wonder how many times they mentioned Squarespace as well, which is like every marketer's dream, right? A Squarespace, a Squarespace.
right up front and center.
Yeah.
Yeah. Squarespace like. That's what they
That's even coining a phrase.
Yeah, Squarespace like. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any last favorites they want to cover? I reckon we've got time for one more.
Oh, do you want to do the statues, Way?
Yeah, that's one that I've been thinking about for quite a while too. And it was for Terre de Femme as well, and it was basically using the female figure in public statues and showing how sexual assault is not okay, you know, because and it's not acceptable in public. I thought at its core, like as an outdoor, you know, it was in the outdoor category, it was so brilliant to use existing infrastructure of these statues to showcase where, you know, the patina had worn off on them, to highlight the issue of sexual assault was just so brilliant. Yeah, I think is one of those ideas that I just felt that, like, as I said, that sense of jealousy or envy within me. I think one thing we discussed in the room as well is like, and of course they're a charity organization, so they may not have Squarespace like money. Um, but it did feel a little bit like it could have used a little bit more, I guess, craft love, like in how they got that message across. Yeah, I'd love to open it up and hear other opinions on that too.
Yeah, I think the actual statues were almost the visual. They were the whole idea, because it's statues where you can see that, like you were saying, where they've been worn down from being touched. And that is such an incredibly powerful visual in itself. And it didn't really need a huge amount of messaging or art direction around it. It just needed something really simple. So I think to let the statues just do a lot of the heavy lifting for you for this idea, that was quite clever, because they certainly did do that. We just did feel that perhaps maybe there were too many words, or maybe the typography could have been given a bit more love, or just consideration to the actual format of the out of home, how it was applied to the statue. But all in all, like a really, really powerful piece, which we all loved.
It can be quite hard to come up with something new in that space as well, because I feel like women have been campaigning for our rights since forever. And so there's been so much done in that space, and to see something new is fantastic.
And then it's actually just been there. It's always been like right there, and no one's done anything with it before. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think like the interesting part also is in the case study, when they mentioned that sexual assault is just like seen as this part of being in public, you know, and the idea of using the statues was just so kind of on point with highlighting that we accept it as being quote unquote okay. And even when they did the vox pops of the people experiencing this campaign. Yeah, I just thought it really kind of showed a different lens and kind of highlighted people's biases of accepting these behaviors in public as well.
What
Mm.
happens in public versus what happens behind closed doors.
Yeah.
We wanted to summarize like what we hope to see more of in the future and the kind of work that was standing out. And Robin, you mentioned that we'd love to just see more brands behaving in a less stereotypical way, showing up differently, having a point of view and actually really wanting to shift the dial. And I feel like a lot of the pieces that we've covered today have done that, which is great to see.
It was just so great to see the work that actually did speak to the jury, being an all-female jury, that there is some work that is just not behaving in a typical stereotypical way. And it's amazing how just by just doing that, you're just opening up the work to be viewed by more people, to reach more people. And there's so much power in that. So for me, it's just so important to continue to make work that is not continuing to embed sort of gender stereotypes or that kind of thing. So it was, if we just learn from that through this process, it was a really rewarding process to see the work in that way.
Yeah, that's such a nice
Fantastic.
way of saying it as well. Like to look at how we don't continue to, perpetuate these stereotypes. Like the boxing ad really surprised me. I think that's something that I took to heart and would hope to see more of in the future as well. Like boxing, obviously it's a sport. It's primarily going to get male audiences, but wow, if we actually created an ad that appealed to a female audience as well, then we've just doubled our ticket sales. Like I love that idea of like by just rethinking the way that you approach your advertising, you can have amazing business results, but also speak to an audience that's been ignored all this time. So I hope that more industries think about how they can target women, even if they're not necessarily a traditional, customer base for them.
That's such a good point. And I think that's already paying off. Including women always pays off. But I read recently that their fastest growing fan base for F1 is 18 to 20 something year old women. So 100% you can create ways for women to engage with sport. You can create ways for us to engage with most things that men engage with if you talk to us, right? It's not that hard. I'll close on that. I think that this has been a wonderful conversation. All your perspectives have been fascinating, insightful, informed, and just a real honor to be able to unpack this work with you all. So thank you so